Hello everyone, my name is JD Cochran. I'm the clinical supervisor here at Piedmont Atlanta, and today I'm going to walk you through how to apply the new Piedmont Healthcare Stress Echo protocol on the Siemens platform. So we have already pulled up our patient, typed our patient information in terms of who we're going to do. The other thing you'll note up here at the top left side of the screen is where our protocols live. I would advise you to work with your specific platform applications persons to create a protocol on the machine. I would also advise you to test this protocol after you build it on a said dummy patient, or just test in general with a workflow before proceeding to an actual patient. So today we're going to walk through an exercise stress echo 3-stage. So we're going to select the protocol here, and you can see machine is now loading our protocol. We will then also to here decide which exam preset for imaging that we would like to use. We'll stick to the SE preset that we have created. And so here, this is the screen you can now image before you start your protocol down here at the bottom. This is when you would do your contraindication screening. We will do that and proceed with that now. So you get your standard 4-chamber image, optimizing your gains, optimizing your image, and we will require a 4-chamber with no color. From there, we will then color our mitral valve. Looking for any mitral regurgitation. Also coloring our aortic valve, looking for any significant aortic regurgitation. Also, we'll then use our CW to CW through the aortic valve, ruling out any sort of aortic regurgitation as well as significant aortic stenosis. And almost done. In the apicals, we'll color our tricuspid valve, looking for any significant tricuspid regurgitation, and we will continuous wave Doppler to estimate an RVSP. In our example here, we have a patient with no significant tricuspid regurgitation. We will then move to continue our contraindication screening to the peristernal long axis, optimizing your images, acquiring a 2D image, then making our internal diameter and wall thickness measurements both in systole and diastole. To rule out any sort of pathologic left ventricular hypertrophy. And we'll usually come up in intercostal above, looking at the aortic root and ascending aorta to rule out any sort of aortic pathology, dilatation, or dissections. And now we have completed our contraindication screening for patients who have not had an echocardiogram within year to date. Now we will then begin the protocol. So here on the screen you can see at the bottom right side of your screen it says protocol start. So we will click that, and built into our system it tells us here on the monitor as well as on the screen we are in a resting mitral valve pulse wave inflow. So we will adjust our image, pulse wave at the mitral inflow. Standard optimization of Dopplers should be done. Freeze. we want to make our measurement for the E velocity, the A velocity, as well as the deceleration time. This is a still frame image, so we will still frame acquire. Now you'll notice as soon as we acquire the image, the machine and the protocol give you the option to go ahead and accept this image, or you could simply hit 2D and go back and reacquire this image. But we like this image, so we will double click, and has accepted, and you can note that on the screen here as acquired and selected on the bottom part of the screen. Next we'll hit 2D to get out of our Doppler, and it tells us what we need to do next, which is a resting lateral TDI. So we'll come over, turn on our tissue Doppler, we'll optimize our gains and Doppler images. Once we have are satisfied with our image quality, we will freeze, not to acquire until we make the measurement of the E prime for lateral. We will then acquire. Again, the system allows us to last resort check and see if we like this image or measurement is correct. And if you do not like this measurement, you can simply hit 2D and go back to acquire an additional image. However, we like this one, so we will double click to accept the measurement, hit 2D to get out of Doppler, and move on to the next step of the protocol, which is, as it says on the screen, resting LV TDI medial. We will initiate the medial TDI. Once we're satisfied, we will freeze the image, make the measurement of our E prime, and then acquire, giving us another chance to go ahead and accept. We will double click to accept, 2D, and now it tells us what we need to do next, which is a RVSP. The box position of note for Doppler really is irrelevant. We'll turn on our color so we can identify where the TR may be coming. We can go to multiple different views, angles, wherever it is that you may be able to or have already seen the TR best. And do not need to acquire the color. We will simply turn on our CW. Again, as we already noted on this patient's contraindication screening, there is not a significant amount of tricuspid regurgitation, not enough to adequately measure, so we will show the attempt and acquire. Again, if we're satisfied, we can double click. If we would like to attempt at this again, we would 2D and attempt it again. We'll double click and hit 2D. You can see on the bottom right corner of the screen everything you're walking step by step for each view, what you have acquired and what you actually have selected. You'll also note that on the control panel you can change the stage that you're currently in, whether it's rest, peak, or recovery, as well as you can change the view from the pulse wave of the inflow, lateral, medial TDI, RVSP, or the apical images. We will then, once we move to our apical images, actually need to adjust our box over the said LV images, because the region of interest box will only acquire what is inside of the box. So we will ask our patient to hold his breath, and we will hit acquire of a live image. The screen will then, once it's acquired, we can tell our patient to breathe, and it prospectively acquires 4 images. It gives us the option to select the images that we like, or if we'd like none of them because maybe our patient moved, he breathed, we think we can just get a better window, we would then defer and hit 2D and go to reacquire. Now to select, you would simply select whichever images that you like, and then when you get to your final image, you would then double click And you can see again at the bottom of the screen here, for the 4-chamber, we acquired 4 images. However, we only selected or only liked 3 of the images. Now it's moving on to a resting 2-chamber. We will optimize. Normally we would utilize an ultrasound enhancement agent for this, but for this test example, we will defer that for the time being. Patient, take a tiny breath in, hold, and then acquire a live image. You may breathe, and we will then, just as before, if we only liked one image, we would double click on said one image. If we liked none of the images, we would hit 2D and defer back to reacquire. Or if we liked all of the image, we would simply select all of them, with the last image being a double click. Resting 3-chamber. Again, listen to the PowerPoint presentation prior to starting this to understand the utilization of the apical 3-chamber versus the peristernal long axis. We'll acquire that as a live image. And we will then select the images in which we like, double clicking on the final selection, and machine then tells us what we need to do next for our view, which is our resting peristernal short axis at the mid-level. So from here we will optimize our image and make sure your region of interest box is covering over the area at which you want. Acquire a live image. It will prospectively acquire 4 beats. Again, you select the ones that you would like, with the final image being a double click. Now our patient will get up on the treadmill and begin exercising. Communication should take place between you, the nurse, and the patient to determine when the appropriate time for the patient to dismount off of the treadmill back into the position that he or her were in before getting on the treadmill, as well as communication between you and the nurse to determine when the optimal time is for the patient to receive the ultrasound enhancement agent prior to dismounting off of the treadmill. In this time, we'll go ahead and set up our probe while the patient's on the treadmill. Patient is now about to come off of the treadmill, and we will get ready and begin. Patient's off. We will now place the probe on the patient's chest, and normally the patient's heart rate would be much higher. The machine automatically defers to post 4-chamber as the default. Once you've initially put the probe on the patient's chest, I would highly encourage you to immediately hit the live acquire button. From here, you can see on the right side of the screen in the thumbnails that the images are continuously acquiring. There are multiple ways that you can do this on the Siemens cart. You can purely go through and acquire everything for 2, 3-chamber as all labeled 4-chamber only, or you can simply change the view as you acquire by toggling on the little roll wheel above the trackball, changing the view that way. The machine then will change the acquisition to 2-chamber post. The benefit to doing it this way is we will then not have to relabel each said view when we go back to the selection phase. And then with each view, when you go to move your probe, you just simply twist down. The other positive benefit to doing it this way is the machine remembers whatever optimization gain settings that you may have done for each individual view, as well as the position of the region of interest box. When you are done capturing your said pictures, down at the bottom you can hit the End Capture button. That will then defer you to the selection phase. you can simply scroll through again on the wheel above the trackball through all the different phases to identify which images you like. So we'll again select the images that we like for our 4 chambers, and then these are actually 2 chambers, as you can see. So in process 1, what we would then have to do is simply right click here on the keyboard, and it will allow us to then change this view's label from 4 chamber to 2 chamber, and it will automatically select it for us. And then same thing here, this is actually a 3 chamber image, so we could again come and right click on the image and change the labeling to 3 chamber. Scrolling through, if you notice, we did it the other way and actually toggled through and changed the view as we acquired. After you have acquired everything labeled as 4 chamber and continue to scroll, it will then show you what your 2 chamber acquisitions are, and you simply just have to select each individual one that you like. Again, there's not really a limit to the number of selections that you can make. And you can see after the 2 chamber, we then changed the view of acquisition to 3. That's why you'll no longer see any more images. Continue to scroll with the wheel, and now we're looking at our 3 chamber acquisition labeled correctly, and we are just simply single clicking on each individual view that we like. And then when we get to the short axis images, you would do the same single click selection for the ones that you like, and when you get to the last image that you like, you would then double click. Now the final stage of this was the recovery stage. Before you begin acquiring your recovery images, you want to ensure that your patient's heart rate has ideally come down to at 100 beats per minute or slightly less. You can be slightly above, slightly below, but you roughly want to be at least around 100 beats per minute. After you've waited 5 minutes into the recovery phase, if the patient's heart rate still has not budged lower than 100 beats per minute or close to 100 beats per minute, you may then go ahead and acquire your Doppler images for recovery. So built onto the machine, it tells you again the stage that we are in, which is recovery, as well as the view, which is the mitral valve pulse wave inflow. So we will do that. We'll turn on our Doppler just like we did at baseline. Mitral valve inflow. Now, all of these measurements with Doppler that we're currently doing, in the event that we used the ultrasound enhancing agent, would be able to be done. The exception would need to be optimizing our Doppler by likely turning our gain down, remaking our mitral valve E, acquiring. And once you acquire it, then the same as before in the baseline, gives you the option to defer selection, or if you like the selection, you double click, hit 2D, and it tells you your next step: lateral TDI, tissue Doppler. Again, if in the event that we were utilizing an ultrasound enhancement agent, this measurement is easily done. You just must optimize your Doppler gains, lateral, acquire, and then double click to select, 2D. Now we're in the medial. Freeze, again optimize our gains, make our E prime measurement, acquire, double click, and the final Doppler measurement would be our RVSP, so we'll turn color back on to optimize and try to find this TR signal, CW, And at this point, the use of ultrasound enhancement agent may actually help you to enhance your TR signal. Acquire, 2D for selection, and then back to a resting 4-chamber, recovery 4-chamber, similar to our resting 4-chamber. We'll go through and select the images that we like, double clicking on the final, 2-chamber, acquire, going through and single clicking for the selection and double clicking on the final, 3-chamber, acquire, single selection and double clicking on the final, with the final image now being our short axis again, and then live acquiring, and single selecting and double clicking on the final. Now, once we've done that, the machine will automatically bring these up for you to compare your resting to your recovery for your Dopplers. What we do for the Siemens platform, and I would strongly encourage you to do for any of your platforms, is take a still frame image of this so that way it's easily viewed when the images cross over to Singo. Problem with Singo Dynamics currently is when the images cross over, they become out of order and jumbled up, and it's hard to compare your baseline to your recovery, or in the stress ischemic workup, it's hard to compare all 3 stages at the same time. We'll toggle through with the wheel above the trackball to scroll through each individual view. Again, now acquiring a still frame image of our lateral, now still frame image of our medial, and finally a still frame image of our RVSP comparisons. And then these are our LV images, top left being the resting 4-chamber, post peak 4-chamber, and then recovery 4-chamber. The triangle that you can see here is showing you one of 3 images that we selected. You can simply toggle through these to show whichever image is the best that you selected. Once you've done that, again, a workaround for a Singo Dynamics problem is to acquire the review image as a live acquisition. So that way, again, it makes it a single image showing all 3 stages for your physicians to easily review. And I would encourage you to do that for each individual view. So there's our 2-chamber showing our rest, our peak, and our recovery. 3-chamber again, rest, peak, and recovery. And finally, our short axis live acquisition showing our rest, peak, and recovery. That is all I have for you for the Siemens platform on showing you the exercise stress echocardiogram protocol that will be rolling out through the Piedmont Healthcare System. I would defer any questions you may have to System Educator Teresa Green or your individual technical director at each entity. Again, I would also strongly encourage you to reach out to your vendor specific system applications person to help build these protocols into your machine. Thank you.